you don't look for people that are naturally curious, that want to drive innovation, that have this need to kind of create elbow room for them to work. If you can't find that, then you're just gonna get by. You're just gonna get by.
Welcome to Machinery Masters, the show where we bring you insights, strategies, and stories from the leaders of heavy machinery dealership world. I'm your host, Ciaran, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Jay Lucas, the president of Jordan Stitter Associates. Jay and his team have been at the forefront of talent acquisition in the heavy machinery industry, helping dealerships find and keep the right people to fuel their growth. Jay, it's a pleasure to have you in the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be on the show.
So, mate, I always like to start this with just a brief background. You know, how did you get started? What was your first job?
Yeah, so I've been in the recruiting industry for 30 years, just about. Next year will be 30 years, and I just sort of stumbled my way into it. It's funny. I use this analogy or this story. I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Toy Story, but there's this scene.
I have 4 kids, so I've watched it countless times.
So you'll probably remember this particular scene. Then there's a picture. There's Woody and Buzz have been captured. They're in this boy's room where he's about to take them apart and turn them into Frankenstein. And the boy's out of the room, and Buzz and Woody are going, they're bantering, and Woody's like trying to tell Buzz that that his little laser doesn't work, and that his wings don't work. And he's like, sure, of course I can do all of this stuff. So he spreads his wings and he jumps off the side of the table to prove to Woody, after being antagonized, that he can actually fly. And instantly he falls to the ground, hits a bouncy ball, springs back up and lands on another table. And he looks at Woody and says, see, I can fly. And he said, that wasn't flying. That was falling with style. And that's kind of how I got into this industry, falling with style. It wasn't intended. I just sort of fell into it. I'm a person of faith. I believe that God had something to do with that.
Yep.
And so I don't necessarily question the why. I just try to seize the opportunity. So that's what I've been doing for 30 years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And, you've obviously, you've been focused on recruiting agencies through IT, accounting, HR, and engineering. So how did you get into heavy machinery, and what made you, you acquired Jordan Stitter at that time. So what made you want to acquire something in heavy machinery?
Well, I don't know that I set out with this. I mean, some companies, their growth strategy is very much driven around acquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily been my focus. I would say that, like the equipment dealers or equipment industry, it's pretty fragmented. I mean, you have a lot of small players. Your average recruiting firm is relatively small. But I was in a peer advisory board, and Jordan Stitter, who was a firm started by a guy that had retired in 1978 from the heavy equipment industry, and decided for his second career he was going to be a recruiter. So he had developed this network, and so he started Joe Jordan Associates. And about 15 years go by, and another guy by the name of Bill Sitter joins with him to take over the firm, and they rebrand it or rename it Jordan Stitter Associates. Joe eventually phases out of the business, and Bill runs it for another 15 years. And he then exits the business and hands it off to another heavy equipment guy who'd been on both the dealer and the OEM side. Well, he had a brief bout with cancer, passed, and they didn't have an exit strategy. Well, because I knew Bill from the peer advisory board that I was on, Bill Sitter, the second owner, he contacted me out of the blue and said, look, I know you're in recruiting. Oddly enough, Jordan Sitter was based in my backyard. We never crossed paths because our industry focuses were so different. And I had already started to want to shift away from local market recruitment as a generalist, where we did a lot of different stuff, to more specialized and on a broader scale. And so I was just in the right place at the right time. I was falling with style, it wasn't calculated. I'd love to say that it was a brilliant move on my part. But I just stumbled my way into it.
So right, you stumbled in, but why have you stayed? There's obviously something about the industry that's
Yeah,
captivated and kept you.
man, I would say I, there's a lot of reasons, but and I'll probably break it into two parts. The one part of my answer is, and it's the most important. It's the people. And there's just some great people in the industry. They don't overcomplicate things, which is
Yeah,
a blessing and a curse. I mean, there's not a lot of innovation, honestly,
yeah,
but these are good, hardworking people. You know, integrity matters to them. Hard work matters to them. Um, they, it's their work isn't just a job. You know, and I love how fraternal it is.
yeah,
Everybody knows everybody,
yeah.
and that creates a community that,
Hmm.
I mean, who doesn't want to be a part of community?
Yeah,
Right. So that's one part of it. On the business side of it, though, there just aren't a lot of recruiters that specialize in this niche.
for sure.
And there are a few, um, but like the industry, we feel like we're in a position to bring innovation,
Yeah,
and improve, just the overall experience with engaging with a recruiter to help with finding talent. So
yeah.
so it's those two things.
I mean, and you said about your experience with helping people find talent. So in your experience, what are the top qualities that dealership owners should be looking for in candidates?
Yeah.
Especially when you're hiring in service, parts, sales, whatever it
Yeah.
happens to be. What should they be looking for?
Well, I think that I'm gonna give you a bifurcated answer again. It isn't just about technical knowledge.
Hmm.
So it's not, oh well, I know this particular product type or asset class, or I know this particular function, or I'm a parts guy, or I have this many years of service, and those are important things for sure. Um, you know, for me, sales, parts, and service, they're the center of the universe for heavy equipment. Without
Yeah,
them, nothing else really has a role. It doesn't need to exist.
yeah,
And that's true really for any business, in terms of there are certain things that drive everything else, and without it, nothing else matters.
yeah,
So for heavy equipment, that's sales, parts, and service.
yeah,
Um, and so we can look for candidates that have those skill sets, those experiences. But if I'm going to offer some advice to somebody around talent acquisition or recruiting, or um, um, just how do you find and recruit and hire people, and how do you keep them? The one thing that I think makes the difference isn't necessarily a technical knowledge or a domain expertise around a product or a job or a role. It's more intrinsic. I've interviewed thousands of people, probably tens of thousands of people in my career.
hmm,
And the one thing that I have found that is distinctive in high performers is not stuff that you can see on the surface. It is this, they're compelled to make a difference.
yeah,
They have to be able to, at the end of the day, stop for a second and look back on the work that they've done and say, all right, we've made some progress.
yeah,
And it is that mindset. So you can interview and screen for all the sort of, obvious things. But if you don't look for people that are naturally curious, that want to drive innovation, that have this need to kind of create elbow room for them to work, if you can't find that, then you're just gonna get by. You're just gonna
Yeah.
get by. And
Yeah.
look, I mean, you got to have people that can just get by, you know.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you want high performers, you've got to have people who are setting the tone around how do we make this not just work, but just constantly work better. It's the whole concept of kaizen, the Japanese continuous improvement mindset of continuous improvement, and
Yeah.
and that's the thing that I think for me makes the difference between a great hire and an okay hire.
Yeah, for sure. And Jay, you have a hell of a lot of experience in finding these people out. And I would say you're probably better than most at sniffing those candidates out and finding them. What sort of advice can you give to a dealership who's maybe starting to recruit people, and like what sort of screening questions, or how do they get to those sort of candidates? Like what sort of advice would you give to people that are just starting out?
Man, just starting out. Um, you know, uh, I think probably if I go back, the analogy that I think about is a fish tank. If a business is a fish tank, the culture is your water.
Hmm.
And so if you have dirty water in your fish tank, it won't matter who you recruit. They're not going to thrive. And so how do you create a healthy culture? How do
Mm.
you keep your fish tank clean? That is really the key. So if what does that look like exactly? For me, the fundamentally that is the tie between organizational strategy and talent strategy.
Mm.
What I find is the bigger issue around, hiring and keeping talent and finding the best talent and keeping talent. It is, that the organizations that understand the value of talent strategy, of people strategy, and not just recruitment, and that HR isn't a tactical thing that's keeps you out of legal hot water with compliance issues, or keeps you out of hot water with your people because their payroll isn't processed or their deductions aren't right. Like that's all really important stuff. um but it's like, okay, well, that's those things are sort of expected. How do you create an environment where people can thrive, where
Yeah.
the high performers we just talked about are actually encouraged? There's a book, Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and this is written by Patrick Lencioni. He talks about the five dysfunctions, and at the bottom of this pyramid of sort of like the five dysfunctions, creating a high trust environment is critical. So I would say if you can't stop and go, okay, if we tie our talent and our organizational strategy together to make
Hmm.
sure that everybody understands what direction we're rowing and how fast we need to be rowing. Like if they've got that down, then I think the rest of it is gets a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
So if you're just getting started, just make sure that you don't minimize HR as being just an administrative function. It
Yeah.
is, but it's way more than that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Talent strategy's got to work with the business, right? And you got to grow each thing at the same time. It's like a building. You got to build the foundations, and then the
Mhm.
foundations are going to have to be strong enough to support the business through growth and acceleration. So you've seen. So obviously, right, we've got people. We're trying to get them in the position where they're ready to scale the business. What we don't want to do is get the wrong people in, because
Yeah.
like you can have a fish tank, you bring a shark into that fish tank, you're fucked. So how do we keep people like that out? And have you seen any instances where a bad hire has created issues within a dealership that has set back, operationally, financially, whatever it
Yeah.
happens to be?
Yeah, I think one that we see pretty regularly is a type of sales rep that is a hostage taker. They're a high performer. The business doesn't. They're countercultural. They're very egocentric,
Yeah.
and they leave a lot of bodies in the wake.
Yeah.
But they produce, And so like this is a good example of where somebody, sort of claims their territory and really just makes they don't, imagine if you've got if you've got sled dogs, they've all got to be running at the same pace. If one of them decides to do less work,
Yep.
it's going to make it really hard for the rest of them to do their job. And
Yep.
so if you're running faster or you're running slower, like that's going to sort of disrupt the rhythm. It is this, how do you find people who, aren't going to come in and be so driven by their own personal pursuits, their own will to want to win, that they really ignore what is the purpose of the organization. Am I
Yep.
adding value to that? Are they in alignment with the vision, mission, and values?
Yep.
And then really more importantly, or as important, is a dealer principles commitment to that these values, these principles aren't just platitudes. They are things that they hire and fire for. they
Yep.
they solve problems using these values. I find in a lot of cases though that dealers, particularly short line dealers, they're not real sophisticated.
Mhm.
You've got guys that got a good business. It cash flows. It funds their fishing and their hunting habits and their
Yep.
golf club and what have you. Um, and sometimes success can be your biggest adversary, because the phrase was it necessity is the mother of all invention.
Yep.
Well, if you're profitable and you're playing golf and hunting and fishing and vacationing, are you really in need? Are you really passionate about innovating?
Mhm.
Your hobby, if your hobby isn't your business, then a lot of times, those other hobbies will interfere with this kind of, how do I, create a business? I don't know if I answered that question. I got a little bit lost in my
Yeah.
own answer, but
No,
um, you know,
you're totally right, because people say to me all the time, like, what do you do in your spare time? It's like, what spare time? you know because like business is my passion, and and like
yeah,
I've been in the industry a long time, and
yeah,
it's what's really indebted me to the industry, is like people
sure,
just like me that just want to do stuff. They're
yeah,
the industry itself is so interesting. So many different paths you can take. Like even just a construction machinery dealership. There's so many niches within that people don't outside the industry don't understand. You can so much specialism that people can move into, and I guess that's one of the problems, right? It's like, how do we make sure, like, there's labor shortages out there, right? So how do we keep a talent pool out there that is consistent, that you can dip into? Not everyone is going to have the resources. Some of the bigger guys, Holt Cat have an amazing organization there, and they're bringing through their own service reps, through their own academy,
hmm
which is amazing for them. Not everyone can do that. So, like, have you seen instances, or would you have advice for people that could help them, bring talented people through, especially on the service and support side, which is a
yeah,
bit more specialized than
yeah,
than some of the other departments?
yeah, yeah. Um, it's funny. So there's, if we go back to HR as an administrative function, I mean, there's a tendency um, for organizations to put recruiting and talent acquisition under HR. And
Hmm.
I'm not arguing that it shouldn't be, but I will challenge people to think about recruiting um, differently based on simple economic principles like supply and demand.
Yep.
If you have a need for a technician that is high demand and low supply, posting a job and waiting for people to apply is a terrible strategy.
Yep.
If so, all of a sudden recruitment really becomes a marketing effort, not an
Yep.
HR effort.
Yep.
And so you have to think about what's the psychology of the technician? What matters to that person?
Hmm.
What gets them excited? What worries them? What is good for them? What is bad for them? And if you don't understand that, these guys, we've tried this. we generally recruit white collar, so salaried positions, manager and up,
Mm-hmm.
unless it's sales. Sales is pretty much up and down the food chain. But um, uh, recruiting technicians is a different animal. And what we found is that technicians, tax accountants, and civil engineers are the most untrusting people in all of Earth. That if you try to message them and they don't know you, you're going to get ignored. They're going to ghost you. They're not going to follow up with you. They're very skeptical. They would rather stay in a job they're miserable in than take the risk of talking to somebody that might open up career nirvana for them. But because it's unknown, they don't care. They're not
Yeah.
going to call you back.
Yeah.
And so you have to understand their psychology. You have to
Mm.
understand what's important to them. And even still, it's hard, you know?
Yeah.
So
That.
it's a key to moving HR from this tactical sort of post and pray strategy to more of a marketing strategy where now you're engaging in, I mean, look, you're a business owner, you got a business, you're trying to promote your organization and your brand and bring in
Mm-hmm.
new customers and fill your sales funnel with warm leads. This is the same thing is true for recruitment.
Yeah.
You gotta nurture those people. If you don't understand organizations, HR in particular, they don't understand the concepts of a buyer journey.
Yeah.
Awareness, consideration, purchase, advocacy. So how do you develop content that sort of begins to break down that high risk barrier, that low trust, high risk barrier? How do you bring that down just slowly over time?
Yeah.
They don't start thinking about recruiting until they have a need. And you're
Yeah.
too late, man. You're behind the power curve at that point.
You're too right. You're so right. It's funny you say about technicians and being so mistrusting. One of the most technical people I know. I'm not going to name him because I know that he's always on LinkedIn. He'll probably see this content, but he'll know I'm talking about him. He's one of the most talented people I've ever met. He refused to talk to me in a role for 6 months. I was, well, how's it going? And blank. Like,
Yeah.
how's it going? Blank. And I said to one of the other guys, "What the fuck's his problem? Why won't he? Why won't he's like?" And then he came to me, and I was like, "You fucking ignored me for 6 months." He goes, "Yeah, like we're quite a high turnover of staff here. People don't usually last long. So there's no point in me getting to know people, and then they're going to leave. So I don't get to know them until
That's
after
so
6 months,
funny.
and then I'll start."
That is
But
so
it's like,
funny. Yeah.
that's just the sort of person. Like, and I've met them all over the world. It's crazy the sort of the types of people that are so technical and so gifted with
Yeah.
machinery. They tend to be the same sort of people. So your idea there around creating the marketing effort, trying to figure out the psychology behind like what
Yeah.
motivates them
Yeah.
is something that's really lacking there, and people aren't thinking about it. They're like, oh yeah, we've got a job, throw it up on social media
Yeah.
and turn it over to marketing, and that's to your point. At that stage, it's too late. You've missed the ship, and you've no supply there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the reality though, it doesn't solve the shortage issue.
Yeah,
There's still a shortage.
yeah,
And
of course.
you've got competing industries. I mean, you guys are obviously um, filling a particular gap. Um, where before the sort of life cycle, the training and development life cycle, if you think about it in a bell-shaped curve, in
Mm-hmm.
order for somebody who's coming in as a counter rep to get to a point of proficiency, that learning curve, that was a long bell-shaped curve,
Yeah,
but to get onto the back side of that learning curve where you know you have good
yeah,
experience, took years. And to be able to shorten that learning curve, bring someone in, and now that's a much steeper learning curve, and it's much more narrow. And so
yeah,
I mean, that's one of the things that like your product is able to address. I think that's just I don't know if that was intended or if that's just unintended, but obviously you're solving for that particular problem. At the same time, you're helping dealers capture more parts sales
yeah.
and improve customer satisfaction. It's funny. I have these conversations. I'm not a heavy equipment guy. I'm the only owner of Jordan Sitter that hasn't come out of the industry. So all my knowledge is academic knowledge. or anecdotal. It's from the conversations that I have with people all day, every day. And for years, 2018 was when I bought Jordan Sitter Associates. So for years, I was just going through my own learning curve, kind of understanding the different roles and even nuances within, let's say, parts. Like there's a difference between dealer parts and, say, OEM parts, and what are the nuances there? And there's a difference between parts technical and parts planning, and there's a difference between supplying parts to a manufacturing line, which is production planning, and spare wear parts, which is very different. So, but the one thing that I came to realize when in all these conversations was, customer satisfaction that's what we're after, right? Customer satisfaction. So if customer satisfaction is important, how do we do that? Well, after sale, it is good product support. That means my machine is down, I need it fixed, and I need it to be an efficient and friendly process. I need it for there to be transparency in that. I need for it to flow. Well, a lot of times these machines, they're not getting fixed, not because the technician hasn't diagnosed the problem. It's because the parts department doesn't have the part.
Yeah.
And so parts is really the cornerstone. You screw parts up and nothing else works, because ultimately that cascades into an unhappy customer. Well, if I have a car and every time I take it to the shop, it's going to take me a month or 6 weeks to get it out, I'm not buying that brand again.
Yeah.
So now sales is affected.
Yeah.
So parts is like central to this. So anyway, I don't know if that's, again, I'm getting lost in my own response. I get so excited about it just because it's fascinating to me, and it's such a fun business.
Like I couldn't agree more with you, because like it's difficult to forecast machines, like how and parts. Like how do you know what parts you're going to need, because all these machines are working in so many different applications.
Right.
A machine working in granite's very different than something that's working in concrete or limestone. So like trying to forecast that is an extreme pain, which is why dealerships will have millions of dollars worth of spare parts sitting there, and that's depreciating assets. They're sitting there, and you're having some stuff that you're going to have to throw away with rust or whatever it happens to be, and you're going to degrade your stock from that. So how do you keep relevant stock in place, and how do you actually make sure that the right parts are there for the customer when the customer needs it? I mean, obviously that's the backbone of Digital Iron, but like that's why we've done this. It's to try and make sure that dealerships can move in a more intelligent way, and we think that there's a general trend around technology that's helping dealerships. And I think dealerships are slowly, like construction machinery dealerships, we're slowly coming into it. We're maybe a bit behind car trends, which is maybe and I think the industry moves like that. So like we see technology transforming automotive industry, trucks, etc., etc. So like with technology starting to help these dealerships, what way do you see technology playing a role in recruitment and work and just general workforce management?
I would say more and more. I mean, technology is if you're not deploying technology and capitalizing on all the features, because look, you can implement a software, but it's only as good as its user. That's the simple truth. So so we actually internally have hired somebody, or we have somebody on our team. One of the challenges we have, because I love technology, not because I love technology, I love efficiency. Technology provides efficiency. It is a tool for me to achieve greater results, or better, more desired results, faster, more profitably, with greater consistency. But if we're slow to uptake the features within these systems, then it's like, well, I mean, you can say I have this. For us on the recruitment side, I mean, HR tech is a huge market. And so you have, payroll systems and benefits systems, and you've got talent management systems and performance management systems. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. Applicant tracking is sort of central to what we do because we're in the recruitment industry. But when we talk about that talent marketing, actually developing those relationships, being able to nurture those relationships, not just because I have an open job today, but you're keeping in touch with that particular audience with specific messaging that helps lower that high trust or that low trust, high risk barrier.
Yep.
And so using multiple channels for us, being able to deploy a multi-channel engagement platform that allows us to create a sort of recipe of engagement channels that include email and LinkedIn connects and in-mails and text messages and phone calls, and to put them together in some blend, and then move them into another campaign based on certain actions or activities, and to organize the contacts based on what level they are. Is it a manager? Is it a director? Is it a VP? What department are they in? Is it parts? Is it sales? And so we do that because we know that generally when people come to us, they don't come to us first. They wait until like they're paying, like they've the sore has festered and is oozing now. You know,
Yeah.
it was a rock in their shoe, and now they're talking about amputation. You know, so reminds me of, I had a Buick Regal, 1982 Buick Regal when I was in high school. And I had, this was a 6-cylinder. One of the spark plugs was bad. So I'm shooting raw fuel into, I guess, what ultimately ended up burning out my catalytic converter.
Yeah.
If I had just changed the spark plug, I could have avoided some of these other downstream issues. And I think, kind of in our business, it's a little bit the same. Technology, can allow you to stay ahead of things, get ahead of things before they become bigger issues. And so for us, just we think about efficiency. How do we get to the end faster? How do we get you with your foot that you're ready to chop off because you've let it fester, that we can quickly turn around the talent for you, and then it's high quality. And so we've built systems and technology to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And obviously the recruitment part of our business, we have recruiters that specialize. So, sales, product, marketing, parts, service, or product support. On the manufacturing side, inventory or supply chain, manufacturing, engineering. These are all roles. So what it allows us is the ability to go deep and wide,
Yep.
so that when you call me with a specific need, I'm not starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And every day's work is adding. It's like compound interest. My
Yeah.
network just continues to grow. And so, anyway, we use technology to help us do that. Again, not because we just love technology. We like the effect that technology brings to our organization. Because ultimately it's about customer satisfaction. Always goes back to customer satisfaction. You please the
Totally.
customer, then you'll be good. You'll be good to go.
Totally agree. And so, if you had one piece of advice to give to a dealership around hiring, culture, organizational structure, what would that piece of advice be? What's the one thing you want to tell dealerships?
It probably depends on who the audience is. So, you have different people in the organization. You've got HR, and obviously, they're trusted by their dealer principal.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a dealer principal, I would certainly tell them what we talked about a little bit earlier is don't look at HR as an administrative function. HR needs to be strategic. You want to be ahead of the curve. You don't want to be just administering HR policies and procedures and compliance. That's necessary for sure, but the real value you get out of HR is not in compliance.
Yeah.
If it's HR, I think what I would say is, I um, I look at it like this. All right, so imagine HR is a basket of fruit. recruiting is your watermelon. It's the biggest, bulkiest, heaviest, most cumbersome aspect of HR.
I had no idea where you were going with that. No
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. So
But I get it. I get
so
it.
don't be afraid when you're juggling all your components of HR. Don't be afraid to set that one aside and give it special attention. It deserves that, you
Yeah.
know? And that special attention might be these jobs need to be in marketing, not in HR, not in talent acquisition. And marketing, like they feed your sales funnel with warm leads, um, they can feed your recruitment and talent funnel too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that point, recruitment in HR can pick it up and process the administrative side of things. So don't be afraid to take your watermelon and kind of slice it up and make it a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
But the biggest challenge I think for a lot of companies, they just automatically assume that recruiting and HR are the same, and they aren't. I mean,
Yeah.
HR managers running, particularly at the small and mid-market dealers, they're bogged down with the administrative, again, important components of HR, but that leaves them no time to do real recruitment, real
Yeah.
strategic recruitment work, which
Yeah.
then basically turns the spigot, your talent pipeline. It's like constricts that. It's like breathing through a straw.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
good. It's not good.
Yeah. And like, last question I have for you, is there any ways that you can give advice for people who want to maybe start, creating a community of people that they want to keep engaged? Like, how do you go about doing that? Like,
Man.
what's the sort of process for doing that? Because that seems foreign for a lot of
Yeah.
dealerships to try and do that.
Um, well, okay, so it depends on the maturity. I mean, what I would say is a marketing person is probably going to help you with that first,
Sure.
because you have to identify your buyer persona.
Mm-hmm.
That in this particular case, we'll use a technician. What is the
Yep.
persona of a technician? Like, what are their characteristics?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Male,
Mm-hmm.
100% male is a common characteristic of the majority of technicians.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, you know, diminishing the women in the technician field. In fact, quite the opposite. I celebrate them, but if you were to, on the whole, look at them, you'd say, okay, well, it's a middle-aged white male, or ranges from 18 to probably 65 years old. They like to hunt and fish. They probably chew tobacco. They drink beer. They like to barbecue. They're probably like sports. Um, I don't know, you could kind of create this persona. So
Yeah.
marketing, once you've figured that out, you go, okay, well, what is it that's important to them about work? What are their career aspirations? In a lot of cases, it's like, look, man, I just want to go to work, get my job done. I don't want to,
Yeah.
have any hassle from my boss. I want things, I don't want to have to swim upstream,
Yeah.
like I want some wind at my back. So the best managers are the ones who take hurdles down for their people. So if that's a common issue, and two, like, are they doing exit interviews? Are they talking to these people? Are they coming up with and identifying what are the common issues, and what's the common denominator around your turnover? Is it a particular person? Is the service manager a jerk and he yells at you all the time?
Yeah.
Is there no career path? Because I'm a great technician, they don't want to take me off my tools because
Yeah.
I'm a good technician. But you're now eliminating a career path for me in service management.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what is it? But they got to figure that stuff out. And then, if marketing can help you figure out, okay, how do I nurture these people? How do I communicate with these people? What matters to these people? So I would say, figuring that stuff out. Does it have to be marketing? No, but they kind of understand the psychological components around getting people to do certain things
For sure.
that they probably don't naturally want to do.
Yeah.
Way more so than HR.
Yeah. For sure. That's really interesting. And to be honest with you, like, this is a lot of work, right? This isn't just throw an ad up on Facebook
Yeah.
and get all these people applying
Yeah.
and there you go. So for people that don't want to go through that process and like, you know what, like, I want to get a professional in to do this, like, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, they can obviously contact me directly. They can find us on LinkedIn. I mean, we live and breathe on LinkedIn. Our website, Jordan Sitter is a subsidiary or an operating division of Reputable Recruiting. So reputablerecruiting.com is our website. Um, we are actually in the process of launching a separate site just for Jordan Sitter Associates. But Jordan Sitter Associates does have a LinkedIn company page. So you can find us there. You can just find any of us. We're members of AED and we're members of AEM. So we're invested in the industry. So you can find us through that. Um, uh, info at Reputable Recruiting. I'll get that email. We can disseminate that. You can go to our website and fill out a web form, and we'll be in touch with you within same day. So, I think what I would encourage people to do if they're trying to figure out, well, one, if I've already come to the conclusion that I need to use a recruiter, how do I pick the right recruiter?
Yeah.
Can't just assume that all recruiters are created equal. That's just not true. And that's true for every profession, right?
Yeah.
I mean, technicians, not all technicians are equally skilled.
Yeah.
Some care, some don't. That's true for doctors, lawyers, recruiters, hairstylists. Take your pick. Some people care, some people don't. That's a big distinction. Our reviews, I mean, we have over 800 5-star reviews. So, you want to, I can tell you we're great, but would rather you just listen to some of the people we've worked with. they'll I think our reputation is really important to us. Hence the brand name Reputable Recruiting as our parent. But they can find us there, reputablerecruiting.com and info at reputablerecruiting.com.
Amazing stuff. Well, brilliant. Jay, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat with us here, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Yeah, same here. Thanks, guys. Y'all take care.